We begin the current Daf Mesech's Bava Kama Daf Tzaddik Aleph. We begin 12 lines down at the top of the Yomid by the two dots, where the Gemara introduced a question that will relate back and actually will be resolved from a teaching that we had on the previous Daf regarding evaluating the damage, meaning to say, could this have been caused by this to hold the perpetrator responsible, or do we not have to do that and we just automatically assume that it was done by the one who caused the damage? Today's Israel throughout the entire world. So we're discussing today's daf dinan, that we evaluate, and that says in the Torah to say if someone could have killed someone else, that he's responsible. The question, however, Gemara introduces is, do we say that for damages too that we have to evaluate and assess, or do we just assume that it was caused by the person who did it? Now, Lamim Gavra, then regarding the evaluating the person, that is, the Gemara says that's not a question. That's obvious that we have to evaluate him. But the only question is regarding the object, that the projectile, the thing that injured him. That the question we have to evaluate, could that have done the damage or not? That we know from the Torah that a pit is generally a 10 tefachim that could kill, and then the Gemara tries to bring a raya from there that you see that regarding the zikin, which is less than that, if that would require evaluation or not. The Gemara continues with the halacha of our previous Mishnah, which is discussing from the Chamisha Dvarim that a person is chai when he injures his friend. Is one of them is boishes. So the Gemara discusses what happens if you use words. Sticks and stones may hurt break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Are you responsible for embarrassing someone with words? Boishes that the halacha boishes is according to the honor of the person who's embarrassing and being embarrassed. Yavin is man. And the question the Gemara asks is regarding the story brought in the Mishnah that Rabbi Kiva gave him time, and then the guy developed a ploy to go ahead and show that the woman is not an honorable woman. Why we give time? Do we give time for payment? The Gemara on Amud Beis discussed regarding if a person is allowed to injure himself or not, and that relates to the halacha bal tashchis regarding destroying different things that a person is forbidden to destroy. So begin the current daf. Daf Tzadi Aleph, 12 lines down. This is going to relate back to the teaching we brought on the previous daf. We had quoted Rabbi Shimon HaTimni, who said, it says in the Torah, the halacha, it says, when it talks about someone injuring another person, it says, if people are going to be fighting, and someone hits his friend with a stone or with a fist, the guy doesn't die, another mishkav, he falls to his bed. Oh, so then there's the chamisha dvarim that yichai b'nezek tzadi p'shem as a baishas. So Shimon HaTimni says, the pasuk says egrif over there in the fist. What is the fist distinct? Is that shemasla edul edim, that Besdin has to evaluate the assault weapon, just like the fist, of kol shemasla edul edim, to ascertain that it was capable of inflicting the injury in question. And that's why Gemara now brings this as actually a question. The Gemara ultimately resolved it from his teaching. The following question: Yesh oimid l'nizakin? Is there a halacha that we have to assess when there was damages? Or do we not have to assess when it comes to damage? So the Gemara explains the question. Mimrin, do we say that when it comes to killing, to murder, then we evaluate? Now we know, says Rashi, because it says in the pasuk, "Be'even yad asher yamis bahi kahu," that regarding with the stone from his hand, that he killed someone, that you have to evaluate to see that bahachi nafka neshama. Okay. To see that's something that could relieve his soul to kill him. With this, his soul will not leave him. Meaning to say, it says be'evenya to say that you have to evaluate what is the weapon. I'm on a zakin, but regarding damages, not killing, just damaging, harming, injuring. Maybe that you don't have to evaluate that, because even if this object is not really fit to injure this person, you still chayiv, because at times a person could get injured with a kolduhu, with even just something very little. And maybe you can be responsible, whatever it is that caused them to get injured. No, maybe there was no difference. You have to say, if I throw a wiffle ball at somebody and he gets this huge black and blue mark, is that maybe that's something that you have to evaluate. Say that that's not something that normally causes such a thing, and therefore you're not going to be chayiv. That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says, Tashema, let's bring a raya from a Mishnah on Daf Yomi base. The Mishnah said, Ma bar, just like a pit, which generally, when it says in the Torah bar, we're assuming it's 10 tefachim. Sheyesh b'kedei lahamas asar tefachim, that it could kill if something falls into it, because it has a depth of 10 tfachim. Okay, so what's the Torah picking bar to tell us to compare? Av kol sheish b'gedei lahamas asar tfachim. So to anything that has a height or depth of 10 tfachim that it could kill, then you can be liable for, let's say, if the animal dies. Now, but let's say if the pit was less than 10 handbreadths, and then an ox or donkey falls in, which is the biblical characters that we talk about, and they die, you're going to be exempt, because that's not something, it's not the type of a pit that could really kill. But if the ox or the donkey gets injured, then you're going to be liable for their injury. Says the Gemara, the Raya is like this. My love, isn't it that when it says in the Mishnah that if it was less than 10 tfachim, if the animal gets injured, you're going to be chayiv, isn't it mimata l'malaka chashav? Isn't it accounting from bottom up? What do you mean? Bava Kama, this is what the Mishnah was saying. Mitafach, from the bottom, from, let's say, the lowest, from one handbreadth, Vadasar until 10 tfachim, misaleka, there's no liability for death, because it's not supposed to kill less than 10 tfachim. Nizakanika, but damages would be applicable. So Amma, you see, the nizakin called do that for damages, even a minute amount, even just one tafach, that we're going to hold you liable for injuring the ox. Well, Shema, obviously from there you infer that ain't amid nizakin, that there's no evaluation when it comes to damages, because maybe it should require 3 tfachim, or 6 tfachim, or 7 tfachim. From the fact that he's saying less, and less is anything from 0 to 10, that you're going to be chayiv. Obviously, we don't evaluate when it comes to damages. No, it's mimal lamata gachashav. It's from top down that we're counting. This is what the Mishnah was saying. Asara, when it's 10 tvachim, misa ikka. That's now you're in the category of being able to kill an animal. Pachas ma'asara pulta. It's a little bit less than 10 tvachim. Okay, you're in the highest category of nizak and isa. Damages will be misa leka. You're right, it can't kill now. But the truth I would tell you, yesh amal and nizakin, there is assessments when it comes to damages. Every single thing. You need it to be as long as it could injure it. What type of injury? It smashed the ox's leg? That wouldn't happen for one tefach. So then if it was one tefach, you wouldn't be chayiv. It's just saying 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Anything less than 10 tefachim is in the category of nizakim. It doesn't mean anything you're chayiv for everything. It means that now you would have to evaluate accordingly, and therefore there's no raya that there's ein oimid l'nizakin. The Gemara says, okay, Tashma, try to bring another raya from a brisa. The brisa says, hikahu al einoi b'sima'oi. If, let's say, someone hit his slave on his eye and he blinded him, or al oznei v'chirsha, on his ear, and he made him go deaf. So eved yitzim and l'cheres, if it's a slave, he's going free because of that injury, because we said any rashi avarm, any primary organ that he injures, sends him free. Now, keneged einoi, but let's say he hit on the wall opposite this guy's eye, and now because of that, ve'inaroi, he can't see anymore. Or keneged oznei, opposite his ear, ve'inashmei, now he can't hear anymore. Ein eved yitzim and l'cheres, the slave is not going free because he didn't touch him. Now, says Gemara, my time, what's the reason? La mishum de be'inin umdana, because you need to evaluate, and we say, well, you shouldn't have gone blind because I knocked the wall right next to your eye. It must be your mazel, your bad flow that caused this to you. Obviously we infer that yesham nizakin, that we're evaluating and we're assessing. We're saying, oh, how did it happen? Wait a minute, I thought you don't evaluate, and the guy should just go free. No, we assess. So you see that obviously there's umdana. We have to assess and say, okay, is it my fault? Is it your mazel? And that's why he's not going free? Says Gemara, that's not the reason. Maybe we generally don't evaluate. So why here, when you do it opposite his ear or his eye, is he not going free? That's mishum derminhu the ivis nafshe. That's the same because you frightened yourself. Kedetani like learn the brisa, which is that we see that we say that the fright was something that you responded to, your body responded, but it's not the perpetrator who did it. Which takes wonders. He says, if that's the case, they were saying who he did it himself. So why are you saying on his eye or on his ear? Even kenegedena and uzne would also be the same thing, as we'll see in this brisa if you hold on to it. But Al Kapanim, the Gemara says, "Kitan like learn the brisa." Because the Gemara was saying a raya regarding if there's oimid l'nizaken. Do we evaluate when it comes to damages. So one raya we tried to bring was a bar less than 10 tfachim where you chayv in the zaken. We thought, okay, it's a carpet, it's just a blanket, like you're liable. Obviously, we don't evaluate. We said no, it could be 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Now we're trying to bring another raya.
Equate that to a bottle an animal. Equate the same thing.
I'm saying now we're trying to bring another raya to also this question. The question the Gemara is discussing is there oimid l'nizakin? Do we evaluate, or we just give a blanket? Your chayev. So this is a case of an eved, and we're saying by the eved we thought we have a raya that you need a umdana because we're differentiating between if you hit him on the eyes or opposite the eyes, and you see that we evaluate. The Gemara is saying no, it's not because of evaluation. We don't evaluate, but here when you did it opposite him, he frightened himself, and that caused his injury. And that's where we bring a right katan like learn the brisa. If someone frightens his friend, you're exempt from dini adam because you didn't do it. His nervous system, his fears, is what's causing his injury. Obviously, in the hands of heaven, you're going to be liable because you caused his injury, but you're pater because you didn't do anything, because he did it himself. Kate said, how so? Talk about Oznei b'chirshev. Let's say you blew in his ear and you made him go deaf. Pater your pater. Because his response system is reacting. It's a grama, but you didn't do it. He's causing himself to be injured. But if you held on to him, which is an action, but talk about Oznei b'chirshev and you blow in his ear and you go deaf, then chayv you're going to be chayv. Because then you did a mice to be a dayim, and therefore that would make you liable. But upon them, the Gemara rejected the raya that you see that we make a oimid l'nezakin when we're doing keneged einay, al einay. Says the Gemara, no, it's not because of undina so much. It's really because of the guy didn't do anything, because you did it yourself. You reacted, you responded, because you got frightened. So it's your own action. If he holds on to you, does an action, then he would be chayv.
When there is, let's say, an action, but that didn't directly cause it.
Right.
Went through something
Right.
else.
Right. So that's right. Exactly. Right. That's what we're saying, that if he's grabbing, that's what Taisus discusses also. Like, what is it? Well, who cares if he's holding on to him? But al kapanim, that's why I asked another question. It sounds like that if he does the action as a kassiv, whatever. But al kapanim, when you do a maisa, then we can be mechayev you because you did a maisa. So even though the blowing is not the same thing as the holding, but still you did. It sounds like that when you do a maisa, then we can mechayev you with the adam. Yeah, I'm saying either the blowing in the ear is what's doing it. Why, if he holds on to him as he does it, but it sounds like once you do a ma'isa, you can be mechayev you b'dei adam. But without a ma'isa, then it's just a grama. I don't know if that's a grama. That's a koyach b'nei adam. That's going to be koyach rishon. It's going to be his action. But something that's like an indirect cause where you did something and he got frightened. So then that's really the Gemara saying is he's doing it to himself. It's not even saying so much as a grama. When you say physical, meaning
Like this was just a noise or got scared, or that's not physical.
Right. Yeah, that could be also. So Shmuel says, Tashma. Shmuel says, let's try to bring another raya. Chamish dvarim. These 5 things, when the person injures another person, which we said he's liable for 5 things, so we evaluate him, and in other words, the court has to evaluate how much is it really a fit for this type of injury that the guy has to be bedridden, and that we obligate this perpetrator. And it gives it right away, meaning we give him that like week of illness he's going to be. Ripa v'sheves, we give him the doctor bill, the loss of work, until he's going to get healed. In other words, we give him that right away. All the doctor bills, we say he's going to be in bed for 3 months, we give him that 3 months doctor bills right now, and whatever food he needs until he gets healed. What happens is as follows, says the Bryce, is let's yamduhu. Okay, they made an assessment, but he was getting actually worse than what they had assessed. They only give him according to how much the evaluation was. they assess 3 months, and he's actually bedridden for 6 months. We don't give him more. What happens if the other way around? What's if I'm do hivri? What happens if they evaluate him that this guy's going to be in bed for 6 months, and 3 months later he's up and running? So nicely come Hashem do. They give him everything that they had evaluated for him. They're going to give him the 6 months of the unemployment and 6 months of doctor bills, because, like Rashi says, which is like we see on the Gemara on Kaf Tazayin, Mishamayir Rachmala, from heaven they had mercy on him, but that's really what you did that to him. You did to him 6 months of doctor bills. But the fact that 3 months later is up and running is from heaven they have mercy on him. It's whatever the therapy and right. Right. So I'm saying here also he doesn't have, he's working. You don't have to pay him for the unemployment, right? But the word is the evaluation, the assessment is what we will mechayev him, and you have to pay for that. Now the fact that he doesn't have to need all those operations or whatever, that's a gift he's getting from Shemayim. But upon him, one thing is obviously that you see that we evaluate when it comes to damage. This is exactly what the Bryce is talking about making an assessment. You see, we make assessments when it comes to the laws of damages. Says the Gemara, yeah. L'meimed gavra, to assess the person, how much sick he's going to be from this injury, that he's going to be in bed, how much he's not going to be sick. That we never had a question. The Vadi Amdin, of course, that we're going to make an assessment, and that you're going to pay for that assessment. Our whole question that we started off the Amid with was Lameimet Chefza. Right? Gabra Chefza, these are the words you find it in the Gemara itself. The Gabra Chefza. So in the person, yeah, but we're talking about the object. We want to know if this object that injured him, this weapon, could that have caused this damage or not? What's the halacha? That we don't have a raya that we evaluate and make an assessment on that. We must say, okay, Tashama, let's bring a raya, and this is really where the ultimate raya is from, which was what we said on the previous Amid. Shimna Timni Yomi says, Ma egrif miyuchid. Shemas leid le'edim. We had a machlekes does have to be le'ed le'edim or just le'edim. But like upon them, they both say the same idea. And Shimna Timni said it just like a fist. The Torah talks about when it's talking about one guy injuring another person is distinct. That you could give it over to the bezdin, you could give it over to the witnesses. They could look at his fist and say, really, such a fist could have made such an injury on this person? Oh, the Torah is teaching you, so to everything that if you want to hold the perpetrator liable has to be somebody that can be given over to the witnesses and to the judges. Obviously, what are we looking at his fist for? That obviously we do evaluate the assault weapon to ascertain that it was capable of inflicting the injury in question, and that resolves the question. Now, Amamar, right, so the other opinion also really holds like that. He just didn't hold it has to be Masala Eda. It could just be Masala Edim. But they all hold that idea that we're still going to evaluate it, and that's what the Torah says his fist, that we have to see could it have caused that injury. Now, Amamar, the Gemara goes back just to point out something, to highlight, that we had said in the Brisa that we quoted, Amduhu v'hivri. So we said, okay, you make evaluations, you make assessments. What happens if they assessed him like 6 months worth of doctor bills? I mean, he become healthy 3 months later. So we said, nice and we give him whatever we evaluated for him, even though he doesn't need it. Says Gemara, Rabba, this supports Rabba. Because I'm a Rabba says, someone that they evaluated, that he's going to be out of commission the whole day. And he actually got better halfway through the day. And he's back at work. Like insurance companies do. They say, okay, this is what's going to cost. And they write out the $15,000, and you go to this guy who fixes your car for $6,000. You get the extra money because that's what they assess it's going to be, and you give him the whole day's work. From heaven, as they had mercy on him, and that's his mazel, and that doesn't exempt you, the perpetrator, from your liability from the full day of that he was supposed to miss work. Now the Mishnah said, continue with this halacha of busha. So we spoke about rokak v'giya b'haroik. If someone spit at someone, and the spittle landed on the guy, v'hever v'chulu, or if let's say he took off someone's cloak, or he bearded a woman's head in public, these were all cases that we said you have to give 400 zuz for the humiliation. So the Gemara qualifies the teaching of the spitting that Amar Papa says Lashon Elabai. This that we're told about that a person is liable for monetary compensation is only if the spit hit the person. A big doy loy. But if it hit his garment, then you're not going to be liable for the 400 zuz for embarrassing the person. Says why? When you spit at a guy and it doesn't hit his skin, it hits his clothing, it shouldn't be any less than shaming him with words. So Amir b'marav mishmid Rabbi Yisrael, he says, yes, this tells us, if you embarrass someone with words, pata miklum, you're totally exempt. Which obviously, no one's talking about b'dei shemayim over here, we're talking about b'dei adam. You didn't do a maisa to the person himself, although obviously the person is embarrassed, his blood is draining from his face, and you shamed him. But again, to be chayiv in this world, we live in the oil masiyah, and in the world of action, and for liability in the courts of law in this world is only when there's an action, and if it didn't hit him, it hit his garment. It's like saying something embarrassing, which you're not going to be liable for monetary compensation for having done that. Now the Mishnah had said, so we actually had the Tanna Kama. The Tanna Kama had said, oh, there's the rule, paid according to the status of the victim, etc. Now, there was the opinion of Rabbi Kiva that we're going to quote in a moment, that he says, well, Philanim should be Yisrael. We don't assess the victim's humiliation according to the individual financial status. Rather, we assess everyone equally, as if they were wealthy people who fell in hard times because they're old children of the office. Now, what the Gemara wants to know is like this. The following question. So the Tanna Kama, who said it is subjective, Lukulu Kamar, was he saying it as a leniency? That, meaning the amounts listed in the Mishnah are the maximum payments? Or maybe was he saying it as a stringency, as the Gemara explains the question. Lukulu Kamar was the Tanna Kama saying as a leniency, the Ika Ani, that there is a pauper, that it doesn't have to take so much. Meaning, I said 400 zuz, but that was the max. A pauper who doesn't, his shame is not so shameful, would only get, let's say, 100 zuz or 200, whatever it is. Is that what he meant to say when he says Hakol lefi chavayday? Because in the Mishnah he had mentioned 400 zuz for this. And what do you want to say with this? You want to say that because some will get less? Maybe we're saying stringently. Because there's wealthy people that no, 400 is on the bottom. That wealthy people, sometimes it can be 800 zuz, 1,000 zuz, depending on how honorable the person is. Masatash Matvinga right from the Mishnah, because that's the Tanna Kama. Right after the Tanna Kama, we brought the Kamar. Rabbi Kiva says, no, Tanna Kama. Afilanim should be Yisrael. Even the paupers of the Jewish people, so we view them as if they were wealthy people who lost their assets, but they still have the status. So we see that in the story that the Mishnah brings with Rabbi Kiva, remember that's Rabbi Kiva's opinion, and he himself, the Mishnah quotes the story that he didn't obligate the guy who took off the woman's hair covering, but 400 zuz, like the Tanna Kama had said. Shma Mina, so we can infer that Tanna Kama Lukula Kamar Shma Mina must be the Tanna Kama was saying that this halacha Hakol lefi chavayda is a leniency. Why? Meaning to say that for a pauper, you don't have to give so much. Because that's what Rabbi Kiva was saying. No. For a pauper, you also give that much. And that's what the Mishnah brings. And there was a story with a man who uncovered the head of a poor woman. Because as Rashi explains, if you would think to say that this shiur of 400 zuz, according to Tanna Kama, is going on the lowest of the poor, and the Kol lefi chavayda was coming to say stringently that you give more for wealthy, and Rabbi Kiva is coming to say that even the Ani Shabbat should take more than 400 zuz. So then, because that's the bottom that the Tanna Kama was saying, and Rabbi Kiva is saying, no, even Ani Shabbat Yisrael is still Bnei Avraham and Yaakov, then why didn't he obligate the one who uncovered the woman's head but 400 zuz? He should have given more. Obviously, that the Tanna Kama was saying leniently that Ani would not get 400 zuz. And 400 zuz is the maximum. And let's say the poor woman that was in the story of Rabbi Kiva, the Tanna Kama would hold that she would only get 200 zuz, or 100 or 50 zuz. Kiva disagreed. He says, no, not true. Even a poor Jewish person is like a wealthy person, and therefore they will get the max, and everyone will get the max. And it's not called a v'ichavayda. And that's therefore you see that Tanna Kama was saying it as a leniency. Now the Mishnah had said, we just quoted the story, and there was a story with an individual that he uncovered a woman's head, etc. This whole story, interesting story. The guy thought he's going to outsmart the system, and he's going to show that this woman, for her big shame, 400 zuz because I uncovered her hair. Just watch how careful she is about her dignity. When I put out a little jug of oil and crack it, and she wants some oil, she takes off her head covering and she starts using a little oil. Not such a mechubadig person. I don't owe her so much money. Now, part of that story was that this individual that Rabbi Kiva had said you have to pay for insurance. He says, Rebbe, 10 lizman, give me time, and he gave him time, and then he had this plot that he set. He says, do we really give a person time? Rabbi Chanina said, we don't give time when it comes to injuries. When you injure a person, and Baishis is one of the Chamisha Devam that you chayiv by Chavala, you have to give it right away. Says the Gemara, when do we not give a person time? Is to an injury that caused a loss of money to the person. Nezek, something that's a ripui, that's the Sheba, something that caused a loss of money. But for shame, which is not a loss of money. We give the person time to pay it up, and in that time, this guy set up this trap, as the Gemara quotes from the Mishnah, Shamra. He waited by the doorway. He stood there, this assailant outside her home, and he broke a jug containing a small amount of oil, and she bared her head and smeared on some of the oil, and he then presented witnesses, and he argued, I'm going to pay such a woman 400 zuz? So on these words that the Mishnah said, Rabbi Kiva said, Amalei lo yamarta klum. You haven't said anything. Why? Because, and this is what the Gemara is going to discuss, that in the Mishnah, his words were, because someone injures himself, although he's not allowed to, he's patur, others that injure him are going to be chayiv, and therefore, the fact that she will embarrass herself has no relevancy. You're still going to be chayiv for embarrassing her. Now, the question the Gemara says, "Vatanya," we're in a brisa that seems to contradict what we said in our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Kiva said, even though a person is not allowed to injure themselves, but if they do their pater, if someone else injures them, they're going to be chayiv. So also, the fact that she embarrasses herself doesn't mean anything. You still have to. But the problem is, in the brisa, Rabbi Kiva, we have a different version. Rabbi Kiva said to him, "Talalta b'mayim adim." We had this last week's parasha. Talu b'mayim adim. He says, you're drowning in which is interesting because it's actually Talu b'mayim Kama Adirim, but in other words, you're putting in effort for nothing, where you're drowning here in the deep waters. But at least acheres b'yadecha, and you just all you got out of is a shard, earthenware shard in your hands. I mean, you didn't come out with anything, because broken earthenware shards are not worth anything. Because adam rushai lechav ba'atzmai, a person allowed to injure themselves. So the fact that she embarrasses herself, she's allowed to. You embarrassing, you're not allowed to. So don't bring me a raya that you have two witnesses who saw that she uncovered her hair to just put on a little jug of oil. Doesn't do anything. Okay, that's not the main thing. The main thing is the contradiction. The Mishnah version, Rabbi Kiva is saying, although a person is not allowed to injure themselves, but if they do their pater, you injure another person, you're going to be chayiv. But that's not what the brisa says. The brisa says the opposite. The brisa says that a person is allowed to injure themselves. So therefore, that's not a problem. You're not allowed to. You're going to be chayiv. So are you allowed to injure yourself, or you're not allowed to injure yourself? Some Rabbi says loikash is not difficult because it depends what we mean. Kan bechavala. When did we say in our Mishnah that a person not allowed to is talking about injury? A person not allowed to injure themselves. You're not allowed to make yourself break your bones or something like that. Kan bebaishis. The brace is talking about regarding shame. A person is allowed to shame themselves, and they're allowed to make come up with these big colorful socks or whatever, something ludicrous. You're allowed to make fun of yourself, but someone else is not allowed to. Says that's not a good answer because masnitin bebaishisu. Our Mishnah is also talking about shame as a continuum of base, and ukatani, we learned because that was the story was and that Rabbi Kiva told them. He says someone to injure themselves, although they're not allowed to, patur they're exempt. So everyone's talking about baishas. So are you allowed to shame yourself or not? Sounds like it's contradiction between the brisa and the Mishnah. So it says the Gemara, no, this is what Rabbi Kiva was telling him. Loi that I don't have to tell you regarding shame. The Adam but the person is allowed to embarrass himself. And even so, if someone else embarrasses him, that doesn't let him off the hook. Don't say, "What do you mean? This guy always comes like this. I've said something. What do I mean? The guy, look, he's a laughing stock. He always embarrasses himself. Yeah, he's allowed to embarrass him. You're not allowed to embarrass him." But that's what they're saying. But even an actual injury, and that's what our Mishnah was saying. The ein adam rishai l'chav ba'atzma. A person is not allowed to injure himself. And you could say that since this person is makulkul and he's not makbid, so we would not make another person liable if he would also injure him. And that's what we're saying. No, others who injure him would be chayav. So it's not a contradiction. Both the Brisa and the Mishnah agree that a person is allowed to embarrass himself. That's what the Brisa was talking about. Our Mishnah agrees you're allowed to embarrass, but our Mishnah was just taking one step further. That even the injury which you're not allowed to do to yourself, if someone else would injure you, then even though you injure yourself and you're potter on that, another person who would injure would be chayiv. Shtais is trying to figure out exactly what does it mean if you injure yourself, you're potter.
Potter yourself and hang yourself or what?
Right. So that's Taisa's. Right. So Taisa says my chiv. Right. So that's Taisa says my chiv shaykh. What's a chiv applicable when you injure yourself? It says maybe it means you're potter from malchus. It says it's not true because a person's actually not allowed to. So to the case of akoitz netiyasav.
What is a vow by a mace? Is that where they learn?
Oh, so actually, all these things that you bring up, actually, the Gemara is going to end up as coming to these points in a moment. But Akapam, that resolves the contradiction. But now that we opened up this can of worms about injuring themselves, says the Gemara, is that really true that a person is not allowed to injure himself? You're saying that that's how you resolve the contradiction between the Mishnah and Bryce. Everyone agrees you're not allowed to injure, but you're allowed to shame yourself. But tell you in the Bryce in a whole different context regarding the laws of Shavuos. It's actually in the Gemara Shavuos of Chazayin. It says like this: you would think if someone took an oath to do bad to himself, and they didn't do bad, which generally you're chayiv for that because you swore to do something, you didn't do it. You would think yay potter. You would think that you would be potter, which doesn't tell us why you would think, but that's what the Bryce says. That's what the pasuk says in the Vayikra. No, it says l'hocha oila hatim. It says that if a person took an oath to do bad or to do good, which we're teaching, mahatabedishos, just like the doing good is something that's optional. Which the Gemara in Shavuos of Chav there explains that it's only talking about an optional thing. Okay, then when it talks about doing bad, it's also rishos. It's also doing something that's optional. So Avi, I'm going to include in that, which is optional, which is the main point. Nishba lahacha ba'atzmai. If someone swears to harm himself, and he doesn't, then you're chayiv, meaning because you're allowed to do that. So you see, you're allowed to injure yourself. You're telling me it's including the optional oath that you can be chayiv for if you don't follow through. So if someone says, I swear, the guy says, I swear that I'm gonna break a leg or whatever, and he doesn't. Okay, chayiv for sure, because you could do it, you could injure yourself. But didn't you just tell me that everyone agrees that you can't injure yourself? Now let a rishon l'chava ba'atzmai. So Mashmuli says, no, this injuring of self is be'eshev betainis. Is talking about that the guy's gonna fast.
Simple.
In other words, it's not like a physical injury that you're not allowed to do. Not make a chavala, but there's a way of doing bad to yourself about starving yourself. Okay, but then the Gemara has a problem with that because there's two types of cases that the Gemara in Shavuos talks about: doing bad to yourself and doing bad to others. So that means the kabasa gabayros acherim. That means to say the equivalent would be that when you're doing bad to others, because the Brisa there teaches, you would think if you swore to do bad to others and you didn't do that, then you'd be chayiv, just like when it's told about by yourself. So the Brisa, no. Lahar lahatev is only when it's optional. To do bad to someone else is not optional. You're not allowed to do that. But wait a second. Lahashivan b'tainias? You tell me that the doing bad to someone else that we're saying that's not a valid oath because you can't do bad to others and therefore you don't have to follow through on that. Is what you told me that doing bad of yourself, which you're allowed to do, is fasting. So what does it mean doing bad to others? It means to make them fast. How can you do that? Like we know you can punch someone, you can beat him up. How could you make him fast Says Gemara, yeah, the mahadeglu b'andarayna. We're talking about where you lock him in the room and he has nothing to eat. So you couldn't swear that I'm going to do bad to him, that I'm going to make him fast. And this is going to be a starvation diet. We're going to lock him in the room and he's not going to have any food. Oh, by putting him into the room? Well, it could be he's in the room, I can lock him. I'm saying, here, you have to know if there's a action related to that. But either way, here, even if you put him in, the question is regarding the shvua. We're saying that you putter. So we just wanted to know what's the case of doing bad to others. He said, yeah, that it's actually could even be something in the same case of doing bad to self, which means doing bad to him, not letting him eat. The Gemara, however, has a problem because the time in the Brisa it says not like this. The Brisa interprets what is the doing bad to someone else that the Brisa was saying that you're going to not have to keep that oath because it's only things that are reshus optional and that's not optional. I'll do bad to another person. Says the Brisa, it's akaplain. I'm going to hit that person. I'm going to smash his skull. Pretty gruesome there. But al kapanim, the problem now becomes is that we know that we were comparing doing bad to others and doing bad to self. It sounds like that the doing bad to others, which is not a rishus, is literally cracking his skull open. But then the equivalent would be by the ra la'atzmoi is also cracking your own skull open, and that sounds like that we said that la'atzmoi it is a rishus. So it sounds like a guy could crack his own skull open.
But that's just because a guy says crack his skull open. It's not exclusive of doing bad to somebody by locking in the room.
No, but that's what I'm saying. We're saying this Brisa is not like that answer. It's not about putting into a room. That was we asked the question.
This is specifically saying what is
the guy took a shvua. He says, I'm going to punch this guy and I'm going to crack his skull open. And he took a shvua. Says the whole nusach, he said, I'm going to crack this guy's skull open. Right? And he doesn't do it. You have to make a carbon. You swore falsely. Right? Oh, you don't have to, because that's doing bad to someone else. Doing bad to someone else is not an optional thing. It's only lahete b'lahara, that's optional. That's not optional. I'll do it. Fine, not chayav. But it sounds like if that oath you took on yourself, I'm so upset I did this. I'm going to crack my skull. I'm going to give myself. I'm going to bang my head against the wall like that basketball player once knocked his head. He was so upset out of play, and he died because he shattered his brainstem, whatever it is. Some tall player, and he died because he was so upset. Right? And the guy swears, I'm going to do that. You're going to be chayav. Because lahar la'atzma is reshus. Oh, but that's an actual chavala, that's actual injury. I thought you told me that you're not allowed to do to yourself. Says the Gemara, you're right, al tanoi. It's a machlekes tanoim if you're allowed to injure yourself. There is an opinion that holds, like we said in our Mishnah, the way we interpreted it, a person not allowed to injure himself. Which the Bryce we just quoted, that holds a person is allowed to injure himself. Now, this obviously goes into a lot of different things about like a person's allowed to do some type of things to his body. Question is it injurious or is it for some type of like a surgery or something? But just to injure sounds like it's a machlokes tanoim. Says man tana deshamad le'da'ama. Who is the tana that we heard that he says ein odem rishai l'chav ba'atzmai, meaning like we said in the halacha of our Mishnah, the person not allowed to injure himself. So the Gemara is trying to find the source. Where do we find that you can't injure yourself? If it's the Tana of the following brisa, Pasuk in Bereishis says, "Va'ach es dimchem lenafshesechem edrush." Hashem says, however, your blood for your lives I will seek. Which, what does the pasuk say? So Rabbi Elazar he says, "Miyad nafshesechem," because it says plural 2 times. Dimchem lenafshesechem. From your own souls, edrush es dimchem, I will seek your blood. Meaning, if someone commits suicide, Hashem says, I will punish you for that. I'm going to claim from you this, that you took your own life. So you see a person not let it injure himself. Says, that's not a raya, but maybe suicide is different because you're killing yourself. But if a person cuts themselves and they injure themselves, maybe that wouldn't be forbidden. So the Gemara says, rather, it's the town of the following brisa. Brisa says, "Mekaren al hameis." The halacha is that we do kriya, we tear our garments for a person who dies. We know the halacha of kriya, but not from which the Torah explicitly says to follow in the paths of the Emoiri people. Now, Amr Belaz, he says, Shemati, I heard that if someone tears his garment too much, he gets lashes for not destroying things. Which place actually wonders. We have a Gemara Moed Katan that says that Shmuel tore 13 cloaks when Rab passed away. So it says, Talmud Chacham is different. That wasn't too much. But if something's too much, then that's going to be a violation of Bal Tashchis. So says the Gemara, B'koshkin Gufay, if your own garment you're not allowed to tear, for sure your body that you cannot destroy. So that would be a raya from this Tana. Says the Gemara, no, but maybe garments are actually different, and actually maybe they're more severe because the psid lahadahu. It's a loss that won't come back. Kihad Rabbi Yochanan, like we find by Rabbi Yochanan, a well-known teaching, which is brought in the Gemara Shabbos and Sanhedrin, Kari lamani mechabdusa. He called his garments his honor. the garment is something that honors a person, and that's destructive when you ruin it, and that's not something that could come back because it doesn't just regenerate. And we find Rabbi Chizda kadav mazgi bein hizmi v'hagu, when he would walk amongst the thorns and the thistles, madli lulamani, he would lift up his garments. Why? He would say, Zeh malarucha, my body, my skin will heal, which that's the miracles of what Hashem makes. Your skin will regenerate from the scars that it has from all the thorns. V'zein malarucha, the clothing, you'd say, I don't want to get cut up from the thorns. No, the clothing will be shattered and torn, and it won't automatically regenerate. So you can't bring a raya. Maybe Bal Tashchis is specifically by clothing. But maybe the body, there's no problem about tashchis. So the Gemara says, Al-Hai Tanu de Tanya. Rather, it's the following Tana that's the source of this halacha, that a person is not allowed to hurt himself, to injure himself. Because Omer Belazar Kappa Beribi, a well-known teaching, which we had in Masechtas Nazir, Matam Aleimer. What does the pasuk mean in Bamidbar, which is told by a Nazir, where it says, V'chipar alav, that he will atone on him, Mashachata ala nefesh, from what this Nazir had sinned on his life. It sounds like that as if there's a sin of the soul of the person that was the Nazir. Now the question is, with which soul did this Nazir sin? What did he do wrong? He didn't do anything wrong. He took a Naziris, he took a neder, and he's performing a mitzvah of Naziris. Ella shetzir atzmim nayayin. The only problem was that he held himself back from wine. That's sinful. God wants you to live, to enjoy, to have pleasure. So for holding back wine, you are a sinner, and you have to bring a carbon. Now, so it's a kabel chaymer. And this is the source. If this guy only held himself back from wine, nikra is called a sinner. If someone pained himself from all types of things, Bava Kama, all the more so that he's going to be held responsible, liable. So if he injures himself, he's for sure going to be held responsible. Now, Taisus has the discussion, which is discussed in a few places, that it sounds like that even a tahar nazir is called a sinner. Problem is, elsewhere we find out that it sounds like that only the nazir tameh, because he repeated his sin, that he's got to do it over again, he's going to regret what he did. So Rabbeinu Tam explains that this that we just say generally that a nazir tar is not a sinner is not because he's not a sinner. He is, like our Gemara says over here, because he held back from wine. It's just that the mitzvah is bigger than the aveira, because the mitzvah to take a neder. Like we know the famous teaching in the beginning of Masechta, someone sees the disgrace of an adulterous woman. He realizes what wine could do, some clubbing could do. He sees what a little bit of skin could do, and it gets you out there in a terrible place. Separate yourself, make gedarim. But there is a little bit of a chet. Just like someone who fasts the time of Chol Shabbos, he had a bad dream. So if he fasts, it tears up all his terrible degrees. But he's got to fast for fasting on Shabbos. So that's because the mitzvah of fasting on Shabbos, which is a sin, is bigger than the sin of the fasting.
Also, perhaps the Thomas shouldn't have let himself get injured because he's harming himself.
Who shouldn't? What did you say?
Let the garment get destroyed. Why should he harm himself?
No, so you're saying that the
What's more important?
Right. So you're saying, my skin will regenerate and the garment will not. Yeah, but I'm saying here. No, I'm saying, but here either one of them is getting ruined. We learn out the whole halacha of holding back from, let's say, wine. We don't want you to have any pain. Your garment being destroyed is you're choosing between two things that are being destroyed. So he said he doesn't have money. He was a poor person. He says, I'm going to be without pants now. I might as well, hold on to it that I'll be able to use it another time. But that's the source for this man da'amah that holds that you're not allowed to injure yourself. But again, the Gemara brought it as a machlekes tanoim. The Mishnah continued and said a similar idea that hakoitis netiyesa b'chulu, that if someone cuts his own trees, this was part of Rabbi Kiva's like mashal that he was telling to the guy, that don't think because the woman embarrassed herself, like, you're allowed to embarrass her too, because we find regarding someone injuring himself, and also we find regarding someone cutting his own fruit trees. Even though he's not allowed to, he'll be pater. Others who do it will be chayiv. And again, that's what Taisus on the top of the Amud was asking. What do you mean? What do you mean pater? Pater what? Monetarily? How could he chayiv to himself? If you're saying regarding malchus, why would he be pater? But you're not allowed to. It's oisel sichreis. So it says that you have to say it's monetarily, or they didn't warn him, so therefore he wouldn't get lashes. Upon him, but that was the case that Rabbi Kiva was telling him. So Tani Rabba Bava Kama Daf, he taught the following brisa. Let's say someone says, "Shaydi harakta," you killed my ox, or the case of our Mishnah, which is why we're bringing this in. You cut down my fruit tree. So the guy responds. He says, "Okay, but atamarti lila harga. You told me to kill your ox. Atamarti lila katza. You told me to cut down the tree." Says the brisa pater. So the guy, the defendant, is exempt because he says that you told me to do this. Now, so on that, Amalei. So Rav said back to Rabbi Bava Kama, who was teaching this brisa, he says, so no one could survive. Kol kamina is such a thing. Any guy who kills a guy's ox or chops down the tree, you told me to. So no victim is ever going to be able to collect damages. So Amalei, Rabbi Bava said, Ismail, should I delete this brisa? Amalei said this text, but just wouldn't sound good. He said delete this text. Amalei says, no, not necessarily. To targum masnitach, that you have to interpret your brisa. Very interesting interpretation. B'shoicha oimid lahariga, by an ox that was waiting to be killed, because it's an ox that killed a person. An ox that kills a person gets executed. It was a tree that was waiting to be chopped down, either because it was not shera tree, which is a zara tree, or any tree that's leaning into the street and is afraid that it might fall on the person and the guy's going to die, where the tree is also waiting to be chopped down. That's the case. So the Gemara says, wait, if that's the case, by katanle. So what's the claimant claiming from the defendant? The defendant said, you told me to, which makes sense. But what was he claiming? It was anyone's going to be chopped down, anyone's going to be killed. So the Amalei says, interesting, I wanted to do the mitzvah when he was claiming, he said, you stole my mitzvah. And when the guy defendant says, you told me to kill him, that's why we believe him, because it probably makes true, probably truth, because the person's not too particular, and he probably forgot that he told him to do it. That's where we say we believe him. You're right. In general, we don't just believe any perpetrator who says, oh, you told me to do it. No, there is a tree waiting to be cut down. But so what was the claimant saying? Yeah, but you stole my mitzvah. The time like learn the brisa. It says in the pasuk in Yikra, it talks about slaughtering a bird or a chaya. It says v'shafach, you spill the blood, v'chis, and then you cover the blood, which teaches misha shafach chichasa, the one that spilled the blood is the one who covers it. It's the sheichit's mitzvah, since he did the shchita, to do the kisa adam.
Then why do we make a bracha?
Oh, so that's actually you get permission from the sheikh if you do it by kaparas time, whatever.
You have to
It's his mitzvah.
understood.
Could be. I mean, we have to know. If it says over there, big sign, whatever. But in Ma'aseh Echad Sheshachat, there was a story of a guy who was slaughtered. And someone else quickly went and took some dust, some dirt, and covered it. 10 golden. Obligated the person who did the mitzvah. You stole the guy's mitzvah. So again, that's what the story was talking about, where the case of the kaitzes netiyos, where the guy says, "Oh, you told me to." What was he claiming? What was he answering? Was specifically regarding this idea of the mitzvah that he forgot that he told the guy. So he's saying you stole my mitzvah, and that's what he was being mechayev. So it's actually interesting because the Tais is on this, what you're asking, he brings something more in Chulin, that it was the schar of the bracha. It wasn't just for the bracha. That's what it was 10 golden. So then Tais wants to know, well, the schar of the mitzvah itself, where did that go? So Tais says the mitzvah and the bracha is all one, and but then he says, but the tree and the animal that's going to be killed, there's no bracha over there. But there's a schar of the mitzvah of the keys, and he discusses regarding. He says like by Birchas Hamazon, there's 4 brachas, 40 golden. He brings a story with one person that they called the shliach balkar to learn from the Sefer Torah, and someone else jumped first and laned first, and asked Rabbeinu Tam. So he says you should give him a tarnagolis to shecht in place of those 2 brachas, and nearly tam. But it's interesting. I mean, this whole discussion about the value of a mitzvah, the balkar or whatever it is, regarding stealing that there's value to that, and that's what the guy was claiming. Now, Amar Rav, continue on this theme about cutting down a person's tree, where we said the guy himself is not allowed to cut it down, but he'll be patur. Others who do it will be chayiv. That's again all in Rabbi Kiva's metaphor. But now that we introduced the halacha of not chopping down a fruit tree, some Rabbi says dikla de ton kaba, a palm tree that bears at least a kava fruit, asla mekatzitza, you're not allowed to cut down such a tree. The Gemara says, really? We learned in the Mishnah Masechet Shvius that says, Kami hebezayis v'likatzu, so how much does an olive tree have to still bear that it's forbidden to chop it down? Is roiva, only a quarter of a kav. So why are you telling me it's a kav? He says a quarter of a kav. Says, no, Shani says in the Chashivi. Olives are different because they're significant, and they're even just a quarter of a kav would make it that's forbidden to chop down. Now, Amr B'Chanina says, of well-known teaching, that's why people have these shadows with the trees in their yards or whatever. Leishachav Shivchas Bri says, my son Shivchas did not pass away. It's only because he cut down the fig tree, not in its time, and that's why it's a very scary thing in halacha, because they were still bearing fruit, and therefore his son passed away.
Apparently, it has to be a chashiv fruit, not just some wild berry.
Yeah. It's a certain amount of fruit. It doesn't talk about the type. It does say if it's chashiv, then even less than that. Now, Amr Ravina says, but if the value of the wood of the tree was very expensive for building, more than the value getting from the fruits, then mutter is permitted to chop down the fruit tree. And Tamahach is similar in the Brisa. The Pasuk says in the Dvarim that it talks about their rock, eitz, asher, but only the tree that you know, and the Pasuk in its length says, Kiloi eitz machol, you know that it's not a fruit tree. That you could destroy and you could cut down. And then you could use it to build, to lay siege on the city. That's waging war with you until you conquer it. But the Bryce actually translates the pasuk a little bit differently. It translates the words "rak eitz asher teda," but only the wood that you know, which Rashi points out is superfluous because it could have just written "rak asher loihu meichel," only that which is not producing fruit. What do you have to say? Rak eitz asher teda. That's actually the ilan meichel. That's referring to a fruit tree, and it's saying rak eitz asher teda. In other words, if you don't know that's what's close to the city laying siege, only this one that is a fruit tree, you could take it, even if it does produce fruit. When the pasuk continues, it says kiloy eitz machlo, because it's not a fruit-bearing tree. Zelin srak, that's a barren tree. So the question is, since we're including old types of trees, so what are you really teaching then? Kiloy eitz machlo, because it's not a fruit tree, that a barren tree you're allowed to cut down, but even the fruit tree, when it's not available, nothing else, you're allowed to cut it down. So the Gemara, that's only to say that if you have a choice of both, you first cut down the barren tree and then the fruit tree. Now, as we continue with Tzadik Bezim, you would think that even if that for let's say for building for a beam, that the value of the wood is more than the fruits, that still the barren tree should come first. It says no rock. Rock is a miyut. It's minimizing this, that you should be makdim the barren tree to the fruit tree. If the fruit tree's wood is so good in quality, then you're allowed to cut that down first. Now, the Gemara brings the story that Shmuel, Aisila Arise Tamri, his sharecropper brought him dates. Achli tasted it. He tasted it in the dates like a wine taste. And he says, "My head, what's going on?" And he says, "Beine gufni kaimi." the palm trees are within the vineyard. Amar says, "Oh, makshi bechamr kuli hai." The dates are weakening the wine so much that it's nourishing from the taste. Tomorrow I want you to bring me either it's the word makar, the source of the dates, and the ikr, which is the tree. I want you to chop down the tree, or it means bring me kar, which is the bamboo, which is the soft part of the tree to eat, which grows around the roots. In other words, I want you to rip out the roots because it's ruining, and let's eat the hearts of palm. I don't want it to ruin it, which, as Tyson points out, because it's the grapevine is better. The grapevine is more important than a palm tree. But again, you see that you're allowed to destroy a fruit tree if there's a reason, like over here, it was ruining his wine production. And one final story of Rav Chizda Chaza Toli Begufni. He saw there were palm saplings in the vineyard. Amalisa said to Shirkrap Akrinu, ripped them out, Gufni Koni Dikli, which means to say, from the value of the wine, we could then go and buy property, but meaning we could buy more palm trees, but dikli lakone gafni. But from the palm trees, we cannot buy grapevines, meaning that the profit would only be a little bit, and therefore I'd rather hold on to the vineyard than to the palm trees, and therefore rip them out. And again, we see that there are certain times a person is allowed to ruin a fruit tree if there's a purpose. Thank you. Anytime for hosting us.